When Stephen returned to his main body and opened his eyes, he found Ezra sitting beside him on the couch. He was still and quiet like a household appliance. Stephen sat up and infused his inner energy into the token. "This is from the Asura realm. Can you analyze it using the chip?" Ezra couldn't figure out what the token was. He tried to activate it using different elements like fire and ice. Nothing happened until he used electricity. The token glowed and projected a map. Stephen was surprised that the Asura realm had electronic equipment. The token was a holographic map contained in a compact device that was easy to carry around. It was similar to a phone. Ezra picked up the token and inspected it. It was circular, and the surface was smooth. He didn't find any incisions or disassembled parts. If he pried it open, he might accidentally break it. Let's take a look at the map. The Asura realm is vast, and there are many tribes. If we break in without understanding the terrain, we'll be at a disadvantage. Ezra touched the projection, changing the angle and zooming in. High-quality images of mountains, lakes, rivers, and oceans were displayed. There were regions marked in various colors on the map to differentiate the tribes. Stephen pointed at the mine. It was covered in flames. This electronic map is updated in real time. The mine was destroyed in the explosion, and the captives escaped to their original tribes. A huge battle will begin soon. Ezra nodded. They'll want to take revenge the first chance they get. They continued to scrutinize the map late into the night. The impending crisis in the city finally reached the military department in Annapolis. The Leviathan unit's leader immediately contacted Stephen to consult him. Scotty and the other countries might not be able to resolve the issue. They're like the multi-country allied army that attacked our northern border some time ago. When they join forces, their numbers and strength are superior to ours, but they're not cohesive in battle. The black hole has a silver netting that prevents either side from physically crossing over. We'll have the other countries station their martial artists near the black hole in case the Asuras send their phantoms again. They're searching for an exorcist to destroy the netting. Do you know if there are any martial artists who practice a similar technique? Stephen gave the Leviathan unit's leader a rough description of the exorcist he'd heard the Asuras talking about. If they really did exist, there could be a martial artist in the human realm with a similar talent. Regular martial artists increased their inner energy reserves as they progressed in their cultivation. However, the technique of an exorcist neutralized all forms of spiritual energy, rendering their inner energy useless. I've never heard of an exorcist or anyone who practices those techniques, the Leviathan unit's leader said. I'll need to send my subordinates to investigate the ancient martial arts factions. Okay, we still have time. Our priority should be spreading news of the invasion to Tempest Citadel. Their goal is to kill Ascenders and steal their cultivation for themselves. The Asuras are made of spiritual energy. They're Tempest Citadel's prime targets. Stephen wasn't sure what Tempest Citadel was capable of. According to Tristan and Zane, they were a powerful faction. Spreading rumors was the best way to lure them out of hiding, but they were a low-profile ancient martial arts faction, and there was no guarantee that the news would reach them. Quran and the United States were connected through the southwestern border. Tempest Citadel's home was located on a beautiful island to the south. They were close enough to Quran and the U.S. to be in full view of them. The current head of Tempest Citadel, Thorin Ambrose, was at a vantage point on the island, gazing at the sea. This was very usually cultivated. Two elders of the faction were close by. They reported the situation at the northwestern border to Thorin. A spatial passageway opens once every few thousand years. There's another realm planning to invade. According to the United States' intel, there were traces of a large-scale battle on the outskirts of their northwestern border. The invaders might have already made their move. Is this intel credible? Thorin asked. What if this is a trap, and the U.S. is trying to lure us out into the open? The official announcement stated that combat drills were being held at the northwestern border, but the sovereign and the upper management of the U.S. appeared in the area. This border has been stable and peaceful for a long time. It's strange for so many officials to show up for a combat drill. News relayed by the government was always a combination of lies and truth. The three of them used their best judgment and concluded that a major incident had occurred at the United States' northwestern border. Tempest Citadel aimed to eliminate Ascenders. When a martial artist ascended, their foundation wasn't stable. Tempest Citadel used this weakness against them, and they'd made many enemies from martial arts factions. If they revealed themselves now, their enemies would definitely seize the opportunity to take revenge. Tempest Citadel had always stayed out of worldly affairs, and Thorin didn't want to join forces with the U.S. if they didn't have to. He instructed the elders to take a small team at the northwestern border to assess the situation. As per his instructions, the two elders boarded a private jet with their team and infiltrated the cultural city on foot as tourists. Aircrafts were forbidden from entering the city's vicinity due to the sudden appearance of a strange black hole. At this time, the extravagant convoy of representatives from numerous countries around the world also arrived in the small and inconspicuous city. The highest-ranked representative was Warhawk's head secretary, Hillskin. They were given a grand reception and escorted to the luxury hotel. After the representatives were settled in the conference room, they stared at each other awkwardly. Some of the countries had schemed against the U.S. in the past. They never imagined they would join forces against a common enemy. The silence was broken when Ezra cleared his throat and gave the representatives a rundown of the black hole. There was no need to hide information from them. They needed to understand the gravity of the crisis. A pair of high-definition binoculars had been placed by the window for the representatives to see for themselves. Hillskin's expression turned serious as he flipped to the last page of the document. I didn't expect this crisis to come so soon. Did you already know about the black hole, or did one of them appear above your country? One of the representatives asked. No, we set up a confidential department dedicated to studying supernatural phenomena. Based on our information, a spatial rift connecting two realms appears on Earth every couple of thousand years. This could be related to the fall of ancient civilizations. The representatives were stunned. Whatever doubts they had from listening to Ezra's claims were washed away by Hillskin's explanation. Judging from the Asora's strength, it was only a matter of time before they invaded the human realm. All of the representatives joined in the discussion and began talking at once. What's the plan? We don't know when they'll break through to our world. We could mobilize nuclear weapons. Are you trying to destroy the U.S. and Scotty? There are many towns and villages on both sides of the border. We have to make sacrifices for the greater good. Do you have a better idea? We've all brought martial artists with us. There'll be more than enough to deal with the invaders. You think it's that simple? Why don't you head to the battlefield when the battle begins? The meeting had only just begun, and the representatives were already quarreling. Stephen had expected this. He let them argue and calmly sipped his tea at the head of the table. The argument continued for quite a while. The commotion died down when their voices became hoarse from talking for so long. The representatives turned to Stephen. Mr. Adams, you're the host. Please tell us your plan. Don't waste our time. There is not much we can do. Our enemy is powerful. For now, we should gather our martial artists in the area to fend them off. That's not a plan, one representative countered. Stephen looked him in the eye. Then why don't you lead a team and cross to the other side? The enemy is one black hole away. The representative kept quiet. There was nothing he could say to that. During their meeting, the black hole suddenly expanded to the size of a sink. When the news reached the conference room, the representatives jumped out of their seats and crowded around the binoculars by the window. A lanky Asura stepped out. His horns and corpse-like skin gave him a demonic appearance. Compared to the previous Asuras, there was a teardrop-shaped symbol and golden waves engraved on his chest. It was a seal to reduce his strength. The aura he emitted resembled a peak martial Grand Master. Stephen gestured to the Asura in the sky. His strength is limited. I suggest you take this chance and have your people familiarize themselves with their attack patterns. When the spatial rift is fully opened, an enemy far stronger than him will show up. The representatives ordered their martial artists to test the enemy's strength. They leaped into the air with their weapons and launched a series of attacks at the Asura. The flickering cascade of light from their techniques was high above the ground. None of the civilians noticed the battle in the sky. The Asuras were testing ways to enter the human realm with their real bodies. Even if they had to reduce their strength to that of a martial grandmaster, their defenses weren't that weakened. They were still invulnerable to weapons and fire. Stephen didn't need to watch the battle by the window to know what was happening. He returned to his seat and visualized the fight by sensing the fluctuations in aura and energy. It wasn't as accurate as seeing it with his own eyes, but it was 80 to 90% credible. Ezra stood next to him and activated the intelligence computing analysis feature on his chip. A reliable method came to him. Mr. Adams, if you sneak into the Asura realm and ruin their resources, it'll reduce their overall strength. You could persuade Tristan to come with you by showing him the token. It contains a map with various areas of interest marked. There could be treasures at some of the locations. We don't know how many Asuras are gathered on the other side. If we charge in blindly, we'll be sending ourselves to our graves. Tristan and Zane were technically Stephen's trump cards. He didn't want to expose them to the rest of the world unless it was absolutely necessary. Tristan has the blade forged from the bones of beasts, Ezra explained. With his level of cultivation, he can open a spatial rift to the Asura realm. He's free to come and go between dimensions. Stephen considered it. That wasn't a bad idea. He asked Jace to stay in the conference room to keep an eye on the representatives and headed for Tristan and Zane's luxury suite with Ezra. They were enjoying a scrumptious meal with wine as if the crisis outside had nothing to do with them. Are you two replenishing your stamina to prepare for the battle? Stephen teased, closing the door behind him. The black hole is expanding, and another Asura showed up. They won't give up until they take over the world. Tristan put his crispy roasted lamb chops back on the plate. He had a feeling that Stephen was about to rope him into another one of his antics again. Let's get one thing straight. We have no intention of shouldering the responsibility to save the human realm. We might be knowledgeable and experienced, but we're not interested in going on the front lines. Stephen sat down and took out the token. Mr. Tristan, Mr. Zane, please don't misunderstand. As the saying goes, companions should share the good and bad. I found a map you might be interested in. Ezra infused electrical energy into the token, and a holographic image was projected on the wall. The detailed map of the Asura realm caught Tristan and Zane's attention. See, I knew you'd be interested. It's like a treasure map of the Asura realm. Why would a low-level Asura carry such a valuable item with him? Tristan asked suspiciously. Stephen shrugged. Maybe it's for convenience. The Asuras are confident in their abilities, so they probably think there's no harm in marking out the important areas of their realm. Tristan was convinced. His eyes gleamed with anticipation. He was itching to get his hands on the treasures. What are we waiting for? Let's go. I'll use the blade to open a spatial rift. Zane felt a headache coming on. This old man was obsessed with treasures. A war is about to break out, but all you're thinking about are treasures? Tristan scoffed. If you don't want to come, then stay here and monitor the situation. There's not much for you to do. The spatial rift hasn't changed that drastically. The Asuras can't cross over with their full strength. Regular martial artists are enough to deal with them. Stephen and Tristan changed into a black uniform and concealed their faces with masks. 2 horns protruded from the forehead of the mask. They were vivid and lifelike. From afar, they resembled the Asuras to some degree. They weren't a perfect imitation because humans and Asuras were different species. Their auras were vastly different from one another. They returned to the living room after disguising themselves. Tristan took out his blade and slashed at the air. A 6-foot-long spatial rift appeared. Mr. Zane, I'll leave things here to you. We'll be back soon. With that, Stephen entered the Asura realm with Tristan. They ended up near the canyon. They hid behind a boulder and observed the burning mine. Smoke and dust billowed into the air. The captive Asuras had detonated the ore vein, releasing an astounding amount of energy. With this much energy in the air, I can't sense anything in the area, Stephen said. That's probably why they want to invade Earth, Tristan replied. Our world is like heaven compared to their wasteland. Stephen looked around and did a quick sweep of the vicinity. No one was nearby. It seemed like the Asuras couldn't suppress the disaster, so they simply left to let the fire run its course. Tristan slipped out from behind the boulder. It's too bad the mine exploded. Valuables could have been buried in there. Well, let's go take a look anyway. Wait, it's dangerous, Stephen whispered. I doubt the Asuras survived that explosion. Maybe they have valuable items on their person. What could they possibly have? Are you an expert on picking up scraps? Tristan ignored him and set off for the mines. Stephen heaved a sigh and followed him. Meanwhile, the Asoras had returned to their posts at the black hole. Their task was as boring as ever. They didn't know how long they would have to guard this place. To pass the time, they engaged in idle chatter. "We're so unlucky. Why weren't we chosen to cross to the other side? We could have been massacring the humans by now and enjoying an endless supply of wealth and glory. What's the point in complaining? The captain's not happy with us, and his mood was even worse after he found out that a token was lost. Every injustice has its debtor. Why do we need to take responsibility for someone else's mistake? Why don't you tell the captain that to his face?" These words hung in the air as the Asoras fell silent. The captain's authority was no joke. Talking to him came with serious consequences. With nothing else to do, they turned their attention back to the black hole. The fluctuations in energy from the battle outside couldn't transmit through the rift. Whatever was happening on the other side was left to their imagination. The Asora who'd lost his token had been killed during the explosion at the mine, but the guards had their tokens on them. The captain was forced to wait until the flames died down before sending his subordinates to search. They couldn't let the tokens fall into another tribe's hands. Stephen cautiously scanned his surroundings as he trailed after Tristan. No one was in sight. They arrived at the edge of the mines within minutes. The ground was scorched from the flames. The high temperature was nothing to Stephen. He used a small amount of his inner energy to form a vortex on his palm. It absorbed the flames and the heat around them. "You can absorb flames of another realm?" Tristan asked. Stephen carefully made his way towards the depths of the mine. "Yeah, the explosion was triggered by the energy inside the ores. The flames were formed naturally, and I can use them after they're absorbed." "If you accumulate too much energy, you'll lose control over it," Tristan warned. "Be extra careful when we cross the rift again." "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." They used their inner energy to condense a protective layer over their skin. The ground had melted from the flames. One misstep and they'd be pulled in like quicksand. Tristan reached out from his inner energy, searching for any treasures that had survived the explosion. The high temperatures had turned the mine into a furnace. Ordinary weapons and equipment had long been melted into molten metal. Stephen continued to absorb the flames to clear the mine and increase its visibility. The explosion had altered the rocky terrain, making it smooth and flat. They stopped when they heard a weak cry for help up ahead. Not just anyone could have survived the explosion. Whoever it was might be skilled, but he was most likely half dead. This was their opportunity to get answers to their questions. Stephen and Tristan followed the voice to a deeper part of the mine. The ground was in ruins, but there was no one around. "Where are you hiding?" Tristan called out. "Are you playing with us?" The voice sounded again. "I'm not. Check the mirror." Stephen waved his hand. A violent gust of wind swept the gravel aside, revealing a mirror on the ground. The mirror was typically sewn into the owner's uniform above their heart to protect them from fatal injuries. Stephen kept his guard up as he crouched down and tapped on the surface of the mirror with his finger. "Are you the one talking? Are you inside the mirror?" "Yes. I attached my spiritual energy to the mirror when the mine exploded. My body was destroyed, and all of my companions are dead." "You're really unlucky. You survived the explosion only to end up as a captive. Whether you live or die will depend on your cooperation. Your spiritual energy is weak. It's not hard for us to get rid of you." The spiritual energy inside the mirror had seen their strange attire when they arrived. It was obvious they were humans who snuck into the Asora realm through a rift. But there was nothing more important than his own life. He humbly agreed to cooperate. "I'll do my best to help." "Tell us about the Asora realm," Stephen said. The mirror didn't hesitate to introduce the world he lived in. There are 4 major tribes in the Asora realm. Their territories are located to the northeast, west, and south of the Lake of Blood at the center. Their horns are black, gold, red, and silver, respectively. The smaller tribes have varying colors of their horns. They're easy to distinguish. The Asoras Stephen encountered recently had black horns, which meant they were from the northern tribe. From the looks of it, the spatial rift had appeared in their territory, and the other tribes didn't know about it yet. The color of their horns isn't associated with blood relations, the mirror continued. The territory of each tribe has a different type of ore. When they consume the ores, they naturally accumulate a tiny amount of elements in their bodies, turning their horns varying shades of color. Stephen exchanged a glance with Tristan. What kind of species were they? If these Asuras that ingested ores 3 meals a day invaded the human realm, wouldn't they end up devouring everything in their path? Why do you eat the ores? Can you absorb the energy? That's right, the mirror confirmed. But that's not our only source of energy. We hunt beasts and consume their cores to absorb their energy. Devouring the flesh and bones of cultivators has the same effect as well. Stephen and Tristan felt a chill run down their spine. The Asuras were beings that ingested raw meat and drank blood with a high and mighty sense of superiority. They treated humans like food. Why didn't your tribe attempt to devour us when you invaded the human realm? Stephen asked. I assume the cultivators of your world were too weak to withstand a single blow. It's a waste of time to eat them and absorb their energy, because there wouldn't be much of an improvement. It's easier to just kill them. Stephen reached into his pocket and pulled out the token. Ezra wasn't around, and there was no sources of electricity, but there was an abundance of energy in the mine. It was comparable to an electrical conductor. Stephen enlarged and shifted the map to the location of the blood-red lake. The regions to the north, east, west, and south were color-coded, representing the 4 major tribes. It was unrealistic for him and Tristan to launch a sneak attack when they were heavily outnumbered, but this information could come in handy if they were ever hunted by one of the tribes. He put the token away and briefly searched the mine with Tristan. Nothing was left after the explosion. On their way out, Tristan took the mirror with them. Your tribe mined so many ores. I don't think you've eaten them all. I bet you're storing them in a warehouse. Where is it? The only reason Tristan made a trip to the Asura realm was to search for treasures. This world was desolate and barren, but he'd taken a fancy to the ores. If he combined the talisman's crafting techniques of the Tribulation sect with the ores, he might be able to create a weapon hundreds or thousands of times stronger. Calm down, Stephen said. If there really is a warehouse, it'll be heavily guarded. It won't be easy for us to break in. Besides, we can't believe everything the mirror says. It could be a trap. There was no turning back once they ventured into enemy territory. They would be surrounded on all sides. Tristan understood Stephen's concerns, but he was an ancient martial artist with countless more years under his belt. Don't worry, he revealed his tribe's secrets to outsiders. That's equivalent to betrayal. If his people find him, he'll suffer a fate worse than death. The spiritual energy inside the mirror knew Tristan was right. He quickly told him and Stephen the location of the warehouse. It was located to the north of the mine. It was at least 600 miles by foot. It wasn't a good idea to stray too far from the rift, but Tristan was determined to find the warehouse. He couldn't resist the temptation of treasures. The unusual boulders became their best cover. As they made their way north, they kept themselves hidden and were constantly on the lookout for Asuras. There was no one in sight. According to the mirror, their daily activities involved mining and hunting beasts. It was rare to see them strolling around leisurely. Stephen was relieved when the sun began to set. He could finally take a break. Tristan took one look at him and read his mind. Don't even think about resting tonight. At this pace, we'll reach the warehouse before midnight. Hunting for treasures is hard work, but it's worth it. Why are you so fixated on that warehouse? The Asura realm is huge. Ore veins are everywhere. Did you forget about the mine we just left? Most of them are crawling with workers and guards. After you occupy the Asura realm, feel free to bring your people and take over the ore veins. But before then, the warehouse is our best bet. Stephen sighed. He was here to weaken the tribe and obtain intel, but his trip had become a treasure hunt. At some point, the silhouettes of houses and Asuras gradually came into view. Stephen and Tristan couldn't disguise their auras. Sneaking through the front door was unrealistic, but going around was even more far-fetched. The town was huge. It would take far too much time to go around and backtrack. How do you plan to get past all those Asuras? Stephen asked. Relax, Tristan said. You'll see once night falls. They leaned against the boulder and recovered their stamina as they waited for the sun to set. The flow of time in the Asura realm was different from the human realm. Staying here for a couple more days wouldn't have much of an impact on the other side. Stephen noticed unusual beasts tied up and dragged through the gate. Why haven't we run into any beasts during our journey? Where do they live? The mirror's reply came instantly. The environment is harsh. Most of the beasts hide in valleys where the sun doesn't shine. Some of them hide between cracks underground. The food chain in our realm is simple. Life revolves around ores. Like the asuras, the beasts can also consume ores to replenish their energy. There are some that dig out tunnels deep underground where the ores are located for a place to eat and hide. It was hard to imagine a beast drilling an entire network of tunnels underground. Stephen watched the asuras cleanly slicing the beast to pieces. It was a gruesome scene, but to the asuras, it was a daily occurrence they were accustomed to. The fact that their blades sank into the beast with no retaliation from their tough exterior or bones proved their strength. Based on the map, the warehouse was less than 5 miles away. Is there another way to enter the town? There isn't, the mirror said. There are no mines under the town, and you're not capable of digging tunnels like the beasts. As a safety precaution from earthquakes, the buildings were constructed on solid rock stratum. The ground is too hard to dig through. Tristan wasn't paying attention. He stared at the sky, waiting for the sun to dip below the horizon. When it's dark, the asuras will gradually retire. I'll take you to the warehouse in the form of a shadow. Did you forget what happened last time? Stephen asked. You were beaten up so badly by the Ascender on Phantasma Isle that you didn't even have the ability to fight back. Tristan frowned. The humiliation of that day came rushing back. You brat. That painting was an inheritance left behind by the Ascender. He retained most of his original strength. It wasn't a fair fight. Anyway, those asuras shouldn't be that hard to deal with. Seeing how confident he was, Stephen didn't say anything else. He'd made the best use of his time and continued to recover his stamina. The Blackhorn Asura tribe's imperial city was at the center of the town buildings. It occupied several hundred square miles, and it was known as the most luxurious city in the entire realm. The chief of the tribe, Tartador, was having dinner in his palace. The chefs had prepared a table of raw meat for him. The food was more refined than the commoners' meals. Tartador was chewing on the hind leg of a desert camel. A 6-foot-tall wine barrel was beside him. He was in high spirits from the spatial rift appearing in his territory. We haven't had an opportunity like this for thousands of years. We have to make the most of it. 2 elders of the tribe were sitting to his left and right. They nodded in agreement and flattered him. The human realm's spatial zone has been weak since ancient times. After we break the silver netting, we'll send our people to their world and force them into submission. The environment isn't bad. The only downside is their lack of energy-rich ores and cultivation resources. The chief wasn't concerned. Several wars had broken out in the human realm during ancient times. There had to be secrets yet to be discovered. The other 3 tribes will be sending representatives to our territory within the week. They want to form a team to invade the human realm, but we haven't resolved the issue with the netting yet. The elders were at a loss. None of the tribes had ever encountered an exorcist. They were an abnormal existence among cultivators, and they weren't that useful in battle. But their value soared when a spatial rift that only appeared every few thousand years was involved. Without an exorcist, the only thing they could do for now was send their weakest members across the rift without triggering the netting and forcing the humans to waste their resources in a fight. One of the elders had a suggestion. Why don't we issue an announcement with a reward? If we offer enough, the exorcist will come out of hiding. Who's going to pay for the reward? Tartador demanded. Don't tell me you want our tribe to pay. That'd be giving the other tribes free benefits. The chief's personality was similar to Tristan's. He was obsessed with money, while Tristan was obsessed with treasures. The other 3 major tribes had requested to invade the human realm together, so it was only right for them to pay the costs. He wasn't in a rush, so he decided to wait for the other tribes to arrive before discussing the details. Under the light of the moon, Tristan prepared to head to the warehouse. He melted into the red sand, turning into a shadow. Step on it. It's an independent space. Stephen eyed the shadow suspiciously. How long does your technique last? What if it wears off when we're in the crowd? Are you questioning my skills? Tristan said impatiently. Just step on it. Stephen tentatively stepped on the shadow. His body was instantly pulled into the sand. When he opened his eyes again, he was surrounded by darkness. His senses were restricted when he tried reaching out with his aura. Tristan took out a jewel and lit up the dark space. It'll be fine. This is an independent two-dimensional space that I created. The shadow blends in with the darkness. No one will notice. Stephen was impressed. Your strange techniques never fail to amaze me. Let's get going. The shadow stuck close to the edge of the buildings and advanced rapidly towards the warehouse. They arrived in less than 10 minutes. The entrance was heavily guarded by Asuras in armor with weapons in their hands. They surrounded the entire warehouse, and some of them were even on the roof. Tristan's shadow was an all-pervasive existence. It slipped through the cracks in the wall and into the warehouse. The interior was astonishing. There were more than 10 floors with a vast underground space. Each area was divided into categories and stored various kinds of ores and crystals. Ores were vital to all the residents of the Asura realm. They were useful in replenishing energy and forging weapons. Tristan activated the shadowy space. Check the building for traps. We'll be in for a bad time if the guards catch us. They split up and inspected the building for anything suspicious. The tribe was confident in their abilities, so there were little to no security measures in place, aside from the guards outside. Tristan flashed a triumphant smile after confirming their safety. The ores are practically ours. How are we going to bring them back? Stephen asked. There's a limit to how much spiritual energy can cross the rift. Tristan summoned the shadowy dimension once more. He reached inside and pulled out his miniature black tower. The shadow was an independent space of its own creation. It was resistant to external interference. The tower increased in size to around 6 feet tall. It generated a vacuum that swept the surrounding ores inside at blinding speed. The mountainous pile of ores disappeared rapidly. Only the high-quality ores were qualified to be stored in the warehouse. The low-quality ones were distributed as food. Tristan was relentless in his frenzied plundering. Even the corners weren't spared. His tower was a storage type of weapon, ideal for treasure hunting. While he was busy, Stephen descended the stairs to an underground space. The objects inside were familiar. They reminded him of a military weapon warehouse. Large caliber cannons and boxes of explosives crowded the room. Stephen ran his fingers over the engravings on the barrel of the cannon. They looked like some kind of array. Based on their placement, they probably amplified the force packed into the cannonball when it was launched. The caliber was around 10 inches, and the cannonball was the size of a football. The cannonballs were made from ores and crystals that were ground into powder. The resulting explosion would be several times more destructive than what happened at the mine. Stephen was curious as to how the Asuras learned to develop technological weapons and equipment. Where was their factory, and who taught them? Tristan came downstairs 20 minutes later. His eyes lit up when he saw the enormous stash of weapons. If we steal everything here, we'll be invincible. Stephen was exasperated. We'll have to make multiple trips through the rift to bring everything back. Time isn't on our side. The Asuras won't give us that opportunity. They're going to invade once they find a way to destroy the silver netting. Tristan wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't the leader of a country, so he didn't have any responsibilities. The worst-case scenario was being caught by the Asuras, and even then, he could use the blade to open a rift to another realm. If you care too much about the details, it'll hold you back. You have to put things into perspective and live in the moment. The truth of the matter is that if you don't have the means to rob this warehouse, even if you wanted to, you need to prioritize yourself once in a while. Loosen up and take some risks. That's what life is all about. War wasn't a game. It shouldn't be taken lightly, and ransacking one warehouse wasn't enough to turn the tides. Stephen stared coldly at Tristan, watching him place the weapons into his tower. If Tristan noticed him glaring, he didn't comment. The warehouse was half empty, and the guards outside were still oblivious to their thievery. A strange noise from around the corner of the underground space caught Stephen's attention. He went over to inspect and found a cluster of cages. Massive iron threadworms were trapped inside. They were more than 30 feet long, and their exterior was covered with silver scales. The noise from before became louder and clearer. It was a voice. Stephen was dumbfounded when he heard the threadworms calling for help. He scanned them using his inner energy. They weren't that strong. It was likely that the Asuras had raised them to dig underground tunnels. His suspicion was confirmed when he asked the mirror the same question. These are mutated iron threadworms. They live underground and survive on mud and stones. We use them to dig direct tunnels to the mines to make the work more convenient and efficient. The threadworms had reached a certain level of cultivation. They were capable of human speech. They squirmed pitifully in their cages, asking Stephen for help. Before he could make a decision, Tristan sliced the cages to pieces with his blade. "You're kind of cute. I'll take you with me." The moment the threadworms slithered out of the cages, they were drawn into the tower. The next morning, the guards went into the warehouse to conduct a routine inspection. The shocking theft was finally discovered. A crowd of Asoras rushed over and surrounded the warehouse, restricting entry and exit within a 50-mile radius. There were no signs of damage to the building, nor were there fingerprints, footprints, or other clues. They were at a loss of what to do. The two elders were livid. Their sharp gazes swept over the guards. "What are you all doing? The warehouse is practically empty, and you're telling me you didn't realize this until this morning? There are no clues, which means there are spies in the patrol team. You worked together with the thieves and helped them steal." The entire area was sealed off. Even if they conducted an investigation now, it would be too late. The thieves were long gone. One of the elders drew his sword, and a sharp light swept past the crowd. The heads of the guards rolled, and their bodies were sliced to pieces. Blood splattered the ground. "We'll use their lives to explain ourselves to the chief." "This isn't the end," the other elder said. "The rest of the elders are cultivating in seclusion or leading a team outside. We're the only ones by the chief's side. Finding the culprit is going to become our responsibility." "There's nothing we can do about that. It's our duty." The two elders ordered the subordinates to pack up the guards' heads and bring them to the palace. The rest of the Asoras split up and began their search for the culprit. The two of them went to the palace and braced themselves for the chief's fury. Stephen and Tristan left the warehouse after taking what they could. When they were a safe distance away from the town, the threadworms they saved dug a tunnel for them underground to help them continue their journey. Their tunnel led to more tunnels that were abandoned after the Asoras finished mining ores and resources. If the Asoras were to enter these tunnels to search for them, they were guaranteed to lose their way. Stephen and Tristan relaxed their guard as they followed the threadworms through the maze of tunnels. "Let's go home," Stephen said. "If we stay here for too long, who knows what'll happen on the other side?" After a prolonged treasure hunt, he was ready to head back to the human realm. But Tristan had other plans. "We caused the tribe significant losses by clearing out their warehouse. Tension is at an all-time high. This is our chance to stir up internal conflict. Let's head west and find the border between the Blackhorn and the Redhorn tribes. We'll leave some of the ores there and pin the crime on the Redhorn tribe." It was a straightforward method to sow discord, but the Asoras were simple beings. It should be effective. The tunnels were dark, and Stephen and Tristan had no sense of direction. The threadworms became their only guide through the darkness. The battle at the northwestern border had turned chaotic. An endless stream of Asoras crossed the black hole. They didn't have a precise target. Their only goal was to wreak havoc on the human realm. They were weaklings who were carefully selected to carry out this mission. Their cultivation wasn't that high, so they wouldn't trigger the silver netting. Jace was in charge of overseeing the situation in Stephen's stead. It had been less than a day, but he was already reaching the end of his patience. His subordinates gave him an update. "The tourists and merchants have evacuated the city. The other countries are sending more troops, and Scotty is preparing their heavy artillery." "Having the advantage in numbers won't resolve the problem at hand," Jace said. "Focus on maintaining order in the city." "Scotty's on the other side of the border. There's a limit to how much we can control the situation." "Leave the territory alone for now. The number of invaders hasn't reached a critical number. The real enemy isn't here yet." Tension was rapidly rising, and the representatives were beginning to doubt the United States' capabilities. There was a limit to how much Jace could placate them. The conference room at the luxury hotel had become a temporary command center. The representatives were discussing countermeasures. "We've eliminated quite a few Asoras, but unless we destroy the black hole, they'll keep coming. What if we concentrated our firepower and attacked the black hole directly?" The commander of the garrison at the northwestern border shot down his suggestion. "We tried. That wasn't effective. To ensure the safety of the towns and villages on both sides of the border, nuclear weapons are prohibited. Aside from towns and villages, the U.S. and Scotty also had fortresses near the border. The heat, radiation, and shockwaves from a nuclear explosion would result in considerable destruction, causing a shift in power from the US and Scotty to the other countries. The already delicate situation would become even more complicated. None of the representatives have a solution. Nuclear weapons were their trump card. If they couldn't be used, they could only depend on their martial artists. The Asuras disappeared when the sun set. Jace could finally relax and have his first meal of the day. Liam joined him at the dining table. Dealing with the big shots from other countries is a huge responsibility, Jace said, shoveling food into his mouth. I don't know how Mr. Adams does this every day. He makes it look easy. Liam laughed. Think about it like this. Mr. Adams gave you this task because he trusts your skills. The more talented you are, the greater the responsibility. Jace heaved a heavy sigh. The Leviathan Unit's leader is your teacher. When are you going to take on a management position and share the responsibility? I'm not ready yet. I have a lot to learn. Liam had made the trip to the northwestern border to represent the Leviathan Unit's leader. His martial arts were second to none, but he lacked experience. If he hadn't gotten carried away during the martial arts competition and almost destroyed the entire island, he might have been assigned the person in charge this time. Where is Mr. Adams anyway? Liam asked. Shouldn't he be back by now? Do you think something happened to him? Is it possible to cross the rift to the Asura realm and check on him? Jace had the same questions. He was also concerned, but he had to reassure Liam. Tristan went with him. They're two of the most powerful martial artists in the country. You don't have to worry about them. We should focus on the representatives. If we leave them to their own devices, they might pull out a nuclear weapon out of nowhere and destroy the border. Then let's have them test their artillery on the black hole, Liam suggested. If we show them it's impenetrable, maybe they'll stop thinking about destroying it with brute force. Half an hour later, heavy artillery tanks and missile launchers were prepared. Dazzling flames streaked across the sky and landed directly on the black hole. An explosion is more dazzling than fireworks, lit up the sky. On the other side of the black hole, Tristan and Stephen arrived at the border between the Blackhorn and Redhorn tribes. They crawled out of the tunnel, feeling reborn by the fresh air and chilly breeze. The stone fortresses dividing the tribes shone under the moonlight. The moon is high in the sky, but the border is dark, Stephen said. If we toss the oars onto the path, the Asuras might miss them. Tristan smirked. Let's test out the cannons we took from the warehouse. Stephen looked into the distance. He sensed an overwhelming wave of murderous intent coming from the palace of the Blackhorn tribe. The Asuras were searching everywhere for them. If you fire the cannon, all of those Asuras will start running in our direction. We'll have to leave as soon as you're done. Tristan had already rummaged through his tower and brought out the cannon. He loaded it and adjusted the angle to the stone castle of the Redhorn tribe. Before firing, he asked the mirror for his opinion. Can this cannon wipe out everyone in the castle? No, there are many defensive arrays set up at the castle, the mirror replied. The Redhorn tribe's fortresses are also scattered across the border. Their combat forces aren't stationed in one place. Oh, they're smarter than I thought. Either way, something's getting destroyed tonight. Tristan pressed the trigger. A flaming projectile struck the castle of the Redhorn tribe. Years had passed since the last war between the four major tribes. The Redhorn Asuras standing guard were disoriented by the sudden explosion. The lucky ones were blown to smithereens on the spot. Tristan loaded the cannon at lightning speed. In one short minute, he'd fired more than 20 times. Don't get trigger happy, Stephen warned. Put that away and let's get out of here. Tristan placed the cannon back into the tower with a smile on his face. It was obvious he'd enjoyed that little stunt. They left the border without wasting any time. The conflict between the tribes was none of their business. Their priority was returning to the human realm. When they reached an empty clearing, Tristan used his blade to open a rift. They hurried inside and made it home in one piece. They were far from when they entered the Asura realm, so they found themselves at the northeastern border when they reached the other side. The commander of the northeastern military base was startled awake when his subordinate came knocking on his door. Is there some mistake? Why would the sovereign appear at our border in the middle of the night? I don't know, his subordinate said. It's not our place to question him. You should go pick him up. The commander jumped out of bed and changed into his uniform as fast as he could. He rushed out of the room and jogged to the command center. The commander threw open the door and caught the sight of the familiar young man. The aura he exuded was unmistakable. It was the Sovereign, not someone pretending to be him. "Welcome to the northeastern border, Mr. Adams." Stephen didn't have time for pleasantries. He gave the commander a curt nod and told him to bring his team in charge of weapons and equipment factory to the border immediately. They had an abundance of raw materials and weapons, and they had to mass-produce them in the shortest time possible. The commander didn't dare delay and did as he was told. Tristan begrudgingly took out a few cannons, cannonballs, and one from his tower and placed them in the commander's center as a blueprint. These were his spoils of war, and he was reluctant to part with them. Treasures were worldly possessions. They held no meaning after death. Stephen couldn't understand why Tristan was so obsessed with them. "You don't have a student to continue your legacy, and you've never thought about establishing your own faction. What are you going to do with all these treasures you've collected on your deathbed?" Tristan looked at Stephen like he was a jinx. "Stay away from me. I don't want your bad luck rubbing off on me. The war is about to begin, but here you are spouting inauspicious nonsense. The most valuable treasures require true talent to obtain. My pursuit of treasures and my progression in cultivation go hand in hand." Helicopters landed on the clearing outside the command center. The commander had brought researchers and development teams from multiple fields to the northeastern border. Stephen led them to the weaponry and raw materials Tristan had brought back from the Asura realm. The researchers were disappointed. Did they come all the way here in the middle of the night for ancient weapons? Stephen could tell they were skeptical. He loaded the artillery shell and aimed for an open space close by. He pulled the trigger, and with a dull bang, an explosive projectile flashed in the distance. The night sky brightened, and the clouds were blown away. The destructive potential of the cannon couldn't be observed by the naked eye. The commander fiddled with his laptop to get the reconnaissance satellite to scan the area where the explosion had occurred. Soon, the numbers were displayed on the screen. The cannon was capable of annihilating a medium-sized town. The heat waves from the core spanned 40 miles, and the shock waves swept a distance close to 25 miles. No radioactive contaminant was found. Aside from Stephen and Tristan, everyone else was stunned. The researchers went straight to work and began to analyze the ancient weaponry. Stephen and Tristan boarded a helicopter back to the northwestern border. By the time they arrived, it was already dawn. The black hole was silent. The Asuras hadn't sent any more of their companions through the rift. Despite his fatigue, Stephen dragged himself to the couch and listened to Jace's report on yesterday's battle. As for Tristan, he'd run off to his luxury suite the second he came back and was already sound asleep. There were many representatives and martial artists from other countries staying in the United States' territory. Several of the representatives had joined forces, and Jace was worried about them retaliating against the U.S. "Should we arrange a team overseas to keep them in check?" "There's no need for that," Stephen said. "If they really are plotting against us, they'll have to think twice once they see the weapons Tristan looted from the Asura realm. One press of the trigger and they'll be done for. But if conflict does break out, Scotty will stand on our side." While Jace was acting as a temporary commander in Stephen's stead, he'd observed the strength of the martial artists from different countries. If the Asura's weapons were capable of wiping them out that easily, the U.S. and Scotty would have to fend off the invaders on their own. Are the Asuras' weapons that advanced? How are we going to stop them when they invade? Stephen was aware that the weapons Tristan had looted from the warehouse were far inferior to the Asuras themselves. "The Asuras are searching for an exorcist to break the silver netting, but they've been missing for over 1,000 years. That'll buy us some time." When Stephen returned to his room, he sensed the presence of a group of martial artists in the vicinity. He materialized the illusory pearls and tossed them out the window, scattering them in different directions. He linked his vision with the gems to search for the suspicious individuals. A team was monitoring the black hole 24 hours a day. It was impossible for an Asura to have sneaked across the rift without them knowing. Not to mention, the city was under martial law. No unauthorized individuals were allowed entry or exit. The unknown group of martial artists could be an insider. Stephen thought back to what Jace had said. What if the representatives had teamed up and were planning to take action against the U.S. before the sun rose? While he was speculating, Zane burst into the room, cursing under his breath. "It's Tempest Citadel. If we don't get rid of them now, they're always going to be a thorn in our side." That answered Stephen's question. The unknown group of martial artists were from Tempest Citadel. "Are you sure?" Zane peered out the window and reached out with his aura to sense their exact location. I'm certain. Me and Tristan tracked them for a while before we went back to Annapolis. It's time to teach them a lesson. The two elders from Tempest Citadel had infiltrated the city as tourists with their team. They remained in the woods for an entire day to observe both parties. Tempest Citadel aimed to eliminate Ascenders to keep the human realm isolated, while searching for a way to improve cultivation. The Asura realm's invasion went against their objective. The black hole was a stable spatial passageway connecting the human and Asura realms. If the Asuras invaded, the ancient chaotic war from thousands of years ago would happen again. Even though they had a rough understanding of the conflict, they still didn't know who to side with or how to fight the next battle. One of the elders pointed to the modern technological weapons set up outside the city. The ancient era is over. Modern weapons are much more advanced. Maybe they'll be enough to force the invaders back. We shouldn't be too optimistic, the other elder said. Be prepared for a direct confrontation. Two unfamiliar martial artists had been lurking around their territory on the island recently. One of them had emitted a dangerous aura. It was obvious he held a grudge against Tempest Citadel. It wasn't until the two elders and their team arrived at the northwestern border that they found out that both martial artists were the Sovereign's companions. In other words, there was a possibility that the Sovereign would attempt to eradicate their faction using modern weapons in the near future. That complicated things. Their team was here to destroy the black hole and eliminate any invaders that slipped through the rift. But after that, they might have to fight the Sovereign. Stephen and Zane were still at the hotel, searching for Tempest Citadel's group. They're hiding from us, Stephen said. Our priority is to stop the invasion. We can't afford to make another enemy. Zane didn't agree. You think Tempest Citadel came all the way here just to watch us face off against the Asuras? When the invasion begins, are you confident they won't ambush us during the chaos? Zane was determined to confront the martial artist from Tempest Citadel with or without Stephen. He stormed out of the room and almost ran into Liam in the hallway. He asked him if he wanted to come along in passing, but he didn't wait around for an answer. Liam was confused as he watched Zane turn a corner at the end of the hallway. He looked at Stephen for clarification. Zane and Tempest Citadel were destined for a confrontation. They might as well take care of it now. The three of them set off for the woods. It didn't take long to find the martial artist from Tempest Citadel. Zane glared daggers at their group the second he laid eyes on them. Did you really think you'd return in one piece after coming here? You've been taking innocent lives for countless years. That ends now. The two elders had no idea why Zane held such a deep grudge against their faction. They'd never seen him before. Tempest Citadel had a long list of enemies. There were too many to remember. Maybe he was one of them. Although they didn't recognize Zane, they knew who Stephen was. Mr. Adams, you don't have any more pressing issues to attend to? This is a critical moment. It's not wise to make us your enemy. Zane interrupted before he could respond. You should be more worried about yourselves. Zane lunged for the elders without another word. Liam followed hesitantly. He felt like he was caught in the middle. A cascade of light covered the sky and the earth as it swept through the forest. The elders' attacks weren't as overwhelming, but they were unusual. When they struck, ripples spanned the trajectory of their swords. It was like the forest had turned into a lake. When the four weapons collided, the impact was minimal. Zane and Liam staggered, not from the rebound, but from the space itself. The elders gave them a contemptuous look. You two aren't Ascenders. Our faction's been dealing with the strongest martial artists in the human realm since the ancient era. This is a waste of our time. Zane was infuriated. If it weren't for Tempest Citadel, he wouldn't have to live with this resentment for the past thousands of years. Liam condensed multiple dark wooden totems. He glanced at Stephen, not knowing if he should go all out. No one knew what was happening on the other side of the black hole. The Asuras could invade at any time. The two elders mercilessly impaled Liam's chest with their swords. His totems burst into a flurry of wood shavings. They pulled back in surprise. Liam looked perfectly fine. There was no signs of injury. I'm impressed. You transferred the fatal blow to your substitutes. Your body's invincible as long as your totems exist. Liam dusted his uniform. Compared to your reflexes, this is just a small trick. You stepped back and narrowly avoided my blade. If his attack landed, the elders' ribs would have been shattered, and their hearts would have been torn out. It's rare for someone your age to be this skilled, the elders praised. Your teacher must be impressive. With your cultivation base and martial arts technique, you'll definitely ascend in the future. It's a pity, but you'll have to die here. That's not happening, Zane threatened. He condensed a large ball of lightning in his hands. Millions of electrical currents crackled within, intertwining with one another like coiling snakes. Stephen couldn't let this fight drag out for too long. He turned to his internal members of Tempest Citadel and summoned the ice dragon. It appeared beside him as a smaller version of its dragon form. The internal members brandished their weapons and rushed towards him. You may be the sovereign, but that doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. Authority and strength are two different concepts. The ice dragon opened its mouth, releasing a tempest of freezing wind and trapping the internal members in a blizzard. Snow and icicles were mixed with the storm. They were sharper than regular swords, but the internal members' weapons were far from ordinary. They swung in unison. The space rippled and repelled the blizzard. While they were in a stalemate, Stephen compressed the aura of his sword and the Killen's core into prisms. The more compact they were, the greater the force would be when they burst. The prisms slipped into the storm, and a series of explosions rang out. The spatial fluctuations vanished. With nothing else in the way, the prisms shot through the air and penetrated the internal members, leaving behind needle-sized wounds. Kill them, and we'll deal with the elders together, the ice dragon urged. Stephen shook his head. That would be a waste. Techniques that alter time and space are rare. I'd like them to teach me. The internal members' wounds were small and almost negligible, but when the prisms entered their bodies, they burst into waves of heat and destroyed their blood vessels and muscles. If they hadn't used their inner energy to protect their vital organs in time, they would have been turned into ashes within minutes. When the blizzard dispersed, the two elders were disappointed to see the internal members lying on the ground. Their group outnumbered the sovereign, but they didn't even last 5 minutes in a fight against him. The elders started whispering to each other. We can't waste any more time here. We need to preserve our energy to handle the black hole. They won't let us go that easily. We didn't prepare for a confrontation with the sovereign. This is his territory, and we're at a disadvantage. They stepped back at the same time, cutting the battle short. Zane and Liam hadn't been able to gain the upper hand. No matter what technique they used, the spatial fluctuations interfered with their movements, preventing them from hitting their targets. And when their attacks did land, they didn't do much damage. Where do you think you're running off to? Zane demanded. It doesn't matter where you hide. I'll hunt you down to the ends of the earth. The elders ignored him. Their attention was on Stephen. Negotiations were done with those with authority, and the sovereign fit the bill. Stephen didn't want the conflict to escalate, but Tempest Citadel was Zane's mortal enemy. He had to defend him. Your team is half dead. They'll die if they're not treated in time. To his surprise, the elders burst into laughter. They lost to you. They're weak and serve no purpose to our faction. Feel free to dispose of them if you'd like. That statement alone proved what kind of faction Tempest Citadel was. It was pointless to kill the internal members. Zane's targets were the two elders. He took a step forward and began to accumulate electrical energy again. The elders waved their hands dismissively. If we wanted to retreat, none of you would be able to catch up. We know that other countries are gathering their martial artists at the northwestern border. Who knows when the invaders will make their next move? Is this really the time to engage in a conflict with potential allies? The invaders are capable of destroying cities in the span of a few minutes. Hundreds of thousands of civilians will be killed. Is that what you want? Stephen knew it wouldn't be easy to deal with the Asuras, and they needed all the help they could get. He glanced back at Zane, not knowing how to convince him to put his grudge on hold. Zane had spent the past thousands of years in the underground palace. It was a sealed tomb, isolated from the outside. There was nothing there. It was just him and his all-consuming resentment. He would spend his days wandering the empty corridors, replaying the moment of his death over and over and wondering what could have been. The monotonous cycle ended when he followed Stephen outside. The world on the surface was breathtaking, but not enough to quell his hatred. After gaining a new body, he found himself lying awake in bed for hours in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling and relapsing into the same old habit of dwelling on the past. Stephen was young, but he'd been through a lot more than people his age. He was never alone, and he had people he cared about. Perhaps that was the biggest difference between them. Without his resentment, he was nothing. Stephen was confused when Zane dispersed his lightning and turned away without a fight. A monk could run, but not his temple. As long as Tempest Citadel existed, there'd always be another chance to take revenge. Both sides calmed down for a negotiation. First, they'd resolve the calamity about to befall the human realm. Then they would deal with personal grudges. One of the elders pulled out a porcelain vial from his pocket. He threw it at his injured team. The medicinal pills inside could heal wounds and save one's life. They had been refined from a unique formula passed down in Tempest Citadel for thousands of years. After dealing with these trivial matters, the elders cut to the chase. Tempest Citadel's objective is to maintain absolute stability and isolation of the human realm. When martial artists ascend, they break through the spatial barrier of our world, which gives beings from another realm the opportunity to invade. Ascenders must be eliminated to ensure the survival of our realm. Zane thought their reasoning was absurd. An ancient martial arts faction has no right to decide the fate of the human realm. The ultimate goal of those who walk the martial path is to obtain enlightenment. Ascending is inevitable. Who are you to meddle in the laws of the world? Stephen didn't join the conversation. He quietly sat down on the rocks by the riverbank and began to comprehend the meaning behind the elders' words. The changes of the world were recorded in ancient texts as a trend. The world was heading towards an inseparable state of chaos formed from a mesh of indistinguishable energy. It was like a multitude of colors staining a clear pond. They would slowly coalesce in the bottomless gray until its original form vanished from existence. Could this be the ultimate fate of time and space? A spatial rift was created every time an ascender made a breakthrough. This was equivalent to damaging the spatial barrier. As more and more martial artists ascended, the damage would increase, making it easier for different realms to exploit the weaknesses in the barrier and create spatial passageways. The more spatial rifts were opened, the faster the spatial barriers of different dimensions would break down. Eventually, all dimensions would merge into one. Everyone assumed they were in control of their own destiny, but little did they know that their actions aligned with the invisible laws of the world. Zane, Liam, and the elders were rendered speechless when Stephen closed his eyes and entered a meditative state. They were here to negotiate, so why was he suddenly cultivating? They subconsciously put an end to their argument. He seemed to be on the verge of enlightenment. It felt like a crime to disturb him. Minutes passed, but Stephen was immersed in his spiritual world, unaware of his surroundings. His mind wandered to the boundless universe, attempting to decode its mysteries and discover the fate of the human realm. When he opened his eyes again, he found Zane, Liam, and two elders staring at him. "Did you reach an agreement already?" "No, we were waiting for you," one of the elders said. "Why did you suddenly start cultivating in the middle of a serious discussion?" "It happens sometimes. You know how it is." There were no improvements to Stephen's inner energy, but the look in his eyes was clear and transparent. He'd comprehended a fraction of the world's mysteries. The negotiations resumed, and they quickly reached an agreement to join forces against the Asura realm. Personal grudges would be set aside for the time being. After the recent wave of Asuras, the Black Hole had been peaceful, because the conflict between two major tribes in the Asura realm had escalated. The Blackhorn and Redhorn tribes had mobilized their troops near the border. The Redhorn tribe's stone castle had been attacked by the Blackhorn tribe. This was a clear provocation. As for the Blackhorn tribe, they accused the Redhorn tribe of trespassing and ransacking their warehouse. Stephen and Tristan had scattered some of the ores of the Redhorn tribe's territory before leaving. Their shoddy attempt at stirring up conflict was full of loopholes, but neither tribe had been able to find any other suspects. They were left with no choice but to accuse each other. The Blackhorn tribe's two elders came forward to challenge them aggressively. "You shameless thieves stole from our warehouse." The Redhorn tribe's commander wasn't one to be outdone. He stepped forward with his troops to counter their baseless accusations. "Stop slandering us. You attacked our castle with your cannon for no reason. Do you want to start a war? Even if we fought, your tribe has been in decline for years. I doubt you can hold on for that long. When your ores are used up, your tribe will starve to death. That's why you stole from our warehouse, am I right? Stop the nonsense. Our tribe has many ore veins. Why would we steal yours?" The commotion lasted for several hours. It wasn't until their voices turned hoarse from lack of water that they gradually calmed down. Both tribes had no interest in starting a war. The Golden Horn and Silver Horn tribes were cunning, but they wouldn't hesitate to reap the benefits when both sides suffered losses from the war. A few hours later, the chief of the Blackhorn tribe, Tartador, and the chief of the Redhorn tribe, Spence, made their appearance. This was a huge mess that couldn't be settled without the higher-ups. Tartador was the first one to speak. Our warehouse was ransacked. There's nothing left. We found our territory's unique ores on your land. What do you have to say for yourselves? If we really did steal from your warehouse, why would we leave evidence lying around in broad daylight? Spence shot back. This is clearly a setup, and that's not all. Did you forget how you bombarded our castle and killed our innocent guards? There were many suspicious points, but attacking a castle was more serious of a crime than stealing from a warehouse. The Redhorn tribe argued that the Blackhorn tribe failed to guard their warehouse properly, leading to an unexpected theft. Their castle was attacked by a cannon which the Blackhorn tribe produced, resulting in casualties. Tartador couldn't argue his way out of these accusations, because the truth was that the Redhorn tribe had suffered casualties. They were forced to compensate the Redhorn tribe with ores to maintain their reputation. While this was being arranged, Tartador's subordinate reported the latest changes in the black hole. It was closing. Space had an innate healing property. Rifts didn't last forever. If the Asuras hadn't constantly infused their energy into the rift, it would have disappeared shortly after it opened. Tartador left the rest of the elders and hurried back to the black hole. He hadn't had the chance to inform the other tribes about their plan to search for the exorcist yet. His subordinates tried to reassure him. The rift was formed in a weakened area in the spatial barrier. We can use our energy to force it open. Tartador wasn't pleased. Don't overestimate yourself. Have you found the exorcists? Not yet, his subordinate answered timidly. You're useless, Tartador snapped. Can't you do anything right? His subordinate was so scared he couldn't speak. He was done for if he couldn't appease the chief. Tartador approached the black hole. It was much dimmer than before. The visibility determined its lifespan. Once it faded and merged with the environment, it'd be gone forever. What happened to the team we sent to the human realm? They were killed, his subordinate replied. When did our tribe get so weak? They couldn't even take care of a lower species? Tartador's mood was getting worse and worse. The two elders had just finished the negotiations with the Redhorn tribe. They rushed over to intervene. There's no time. We should gather the other major tribes and come up with a plan together. Tartador refused. The rift had appeared in their territory, and it was a golden opportunity to rise above the other tribes. He condensed a phantom of himself and gathered a team of Asuras to test the human strength for himself. It's too risky, the elders protested. The strongest martial artists in the human realm were almost at the level of ascension. So what? It doesn't change the weak nature of their species. The black hole released a violent fluctuation in energy. The surrounding clouds were blown away. Stephen and the others at the northwestern border noticed the strange phenomenon. The martial artists from other countries leaped into the air with their weapons, preparing for the next battle. They'd won the previous battles, and they weren't as alert as they had been when they first arrived. The whole reason Tempest Citadel exists is to eliminate spatial rifts. Do you have a technique to destroy the black hole? Stephen asked. Be patient, the elders said. The rifts follow a certain pattern after they appear. We have to wait until it's weakened before we take action. The phantom of an Asura appeared from the black hole. It was Tartador and his followers. Another battle erupted without greetings. The goal of both sides was to eliminate each other. Tartador lightly pressed his palm against one of the martial artists and transmitted his energy. The energy erupted, destroying the martial artist's internal organs, bones, and skin, and killing him instantly. The other martial artist cautiously stepped back and attacked from a distance. A cage of light enveloped Tartador and his followers. Is that all you got? I don't have high expectations of you humans in the first place. The human realm will be ours soon. The Asuras had to put on a satisfactory performance because their chief was here. They held nothing back. Bodies fell from the sky, dyeing the border red. The representatives from the other countries couldn't sit still in the face of a one-sided battle. They rushed over to Stephen. Mr. Adams, you have to do something. If this continues, all our forces will be wiped out. The Asuras in the lead are most likely high-ranking members of their tribe. Hold them back while my people prepare the artillery. It'll take 3 minutes. 3 minutes was neither long nor short, but Tartador was fast. He unleashed hundreds of thousands of moves. The martial artists were blown to pieces before they could get close to him. The gruesome explosions were happening all around him, but not only was he unscathed, his clothes remained clean and tidy. The number of martial artists began to dwindle as Tardador's strange palm technique continued to land. Blood rained from the sky. One of the elders from Tempest Citadel leaped into action. His sword glowed and rippled in the air surrounding Tardador like a binding spell. His movements became sluggish and uncoordinated. You're a martial artist with space-time techniques. The trip was worth it after all. There are many cultivators in the human realm, the elder said. Their martial arts techniques are extensive and profound. It's a shame you won't live long enough to witness them. Save that arrogance for after you take down my phantom. Tardador locked onto the elder as his target. He stopped paying attention to his followers and the martial artists. The elder's sword technique was profound, but it left behind air currents. To negate the effects of the spatial fluctuations, Tardador fused his body with the air currents. He was like a leaf carried away by the wind. His coordination was affected, but his ever-changing position from the airflow prevented the elder's attacks from landing. In the eyes of outsiders, his movements were strange and unpredictable. Stephen pulled out the mirror from his jacket pocket. Who is he? A commander of your tribe's combat forces? No, he's our chief, Tardador. I wasn't expecting him to personally conquer the human realm. The voice of the spiritual energy inside the mirror was filled with sorrow. He thought he could survive if he stayed by Stephen's side as a traitor to his tribe. But now that Tardador was here, Stephen would be one of the first people he eliminated. Why are you panicking? Stephen asked. That's a phantom of your chief. He can't pass through the rift with his real body. Maybe not now, but he will soon. Exorcists exist in the Asura realm. If the 4 major tribes work together, they'll definitely find them. That could take months or years. The rift won't last that long. Stephen had to maintain an optimistic attitude, because if he didn't, humanity and the world as they knew it were as good as over. Everyone looked up at the sky, watching the fierce battle between Tardador and the Elder from Tempest Citadel. Tardador seemed to have the upper hand. His movements were elusive. He circled the Elder's sword and counterattacked through the openings in his strikes. Tardador's palm never directly reached the Elder, but the wind it generated slammed into his body like a heavy hammer. With every hit, his face turned paler. Tardador was in a phantom body, and it didn't take long for the spatial fluctuations to lose their effect. 3 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. Stephen called the Elder back. He pulled away from his fight with Tardador and rushed to the ground. 1 second later, thousands of heavy artillery fired and bombarded the Asuras near the black hole. A tempestuous shockwave swept the sky. The weaker Asuras were the first to stagger. They relied on their high external defense to withstand the explosion, but it wasn't enough. The projectiles released metal fragments when they exploded. The fragments weren't as sharp as a blade, but they left deep gashes on the Asura's skin. The high temperature of the explosion also vaporized their blood and charred their flesh. The martial artists saw their chance. They impaled the weaker Asurus with their swords before they could regain their bearings. Tardador flew into a rage. Harming my people is the same as challenging God's authority. All of you will die here. No one paid attention to his remarks. The turn's radar locked onto him and fired a barrage of bullets. They were specifically designed to counter missiles. The bullets covered a wide range, but there was no room for Tardador to dodge. His skin burned, and it felt like it had been set on fire. Stephen summoned the ice dragon. The turrets aren't enough to hold him back. Do you have a way to restrict his movements? I'll freeze him. The ice dragon reached the black hole with one beat of its wings. It opened its mouth, and a stream of icy wind swept over Tardador. Frost covered his body, and the freezing energy invaded his internal organs. No matter how impenetrable his skin was, it'd become as fragile as ice at once his body temperature dropped below a certain degree. Tardador threw out his palm, but he couldn't block all the bullets. His skin was frozen, and when the bullets hit him again, cracks appeared like broken glass. The human realm was weak. He couldn't understand how he was losing to their weapons. The ice dragon flicked its tail with the force of an army. Tardador's figure blurred, leaving behind a series of afterimages. He had no intentions of facing the beast head-on. He rushed to the black hole. One more step, and he would be back in the Asura realm. He wasn't pleased with the outcome of this battle, but he couldn't annihilate the humans in his phantom form. Tardador glanced back. The Elder and the Ice Dragon weren't pursuing him. You went all out, but you barely managed to harm my phantom. Before I leave, I'll give you a parting gift." He used his sharp nails to cut his palm. The shower of blood fell from the sky. When the martial artist came in contact with the blood, a ghastly transformation began. Screams of terror erupted from the crowd of martial artists. They scurried in every direction, as if they were about to crawl out of their own skin. Their skin turned black like it had been scorched by fire. 2 horns protruded from their foreheads. Their human form was replaced by an Asura's appearance. Their eyes turned bright red, and they lost their rationality. They stopped screaming and struggling. They tightened their grip on their weapons and sprinted in the direction of the city. Stephen was astonished by their transformation, but he reacted quickly. He gave an order to attack. The representatives were enraged. "Are you that heartless? We select the strongest martial artists from our country to assist you. How do you know this isn't a minor issue? They might return to normal after some time passes." If they returned home with less than half of the martial artists they brought with them, it'd be a big blow to their reputation. "Do you see their horns?" Stephen argued. "The Asura's blood could be the same kind of virus. Based on Earth's population density and extensive transportation network, it wouldn't take long for humanity to succumb to the virus and turn into Asuras. Are you willing to take that risk?" There was no answer. No one wanted to take responsibility. The guards in the city acknowledged the sovereign's order and fired the artillery. A rain of bullets plummeted over the mutated martial artists, and balls of fire swallowed them whole. Their transformation hadn't reached the point where their skin was as resilient as the Asuras. Their bodies were flesh and blood like regular humans. Tardador took advantage of the chaos and ran into the black hole. The battle had resulted in significant casualties for the human realm. 10 Asuras had been killed, but more than 100 martial artists had perished. Peace returned to the battlefield, but no one was thrilled about her victory. "Mr. Adams, we'll have to leave the rest in your hands," Hilskin said with a dramatic sigh. "We'll return to our respective countries and organize our forces before coming back to the border to provide assistance." This was an excuse for them to escape the crisis. The black hole had appeared at the border, dividing the U.S. and Scotty. This was their mess, not the rest of the world's. Stephen saw through Hilskin's intentions. "You should be aware of the consequences of a large-scale invasion. This is a crisis with the fate of humanity on the line." The other representatives rushed to defend themselves. "Please don't misunderstand. We couldn't possibly fend off another wave with the people we have left. It's only natural for us to return home and make sufficient preparations." They gave a few more excuses before running off to their private jets and escaping the northwestern border. They were representatives from major world powers, but their sense of responsibility was non-existent in the face of a crisis. Stephen couldn't be bothered with them. He had more pressing matters to attend to. Ever since the black hole appeared, Scotty's representatives have given it his all to fight the Asuras with his martial artists and heavy artillery. He was mentally and physically exhausted. "Mr. Adams, will you be able to handle the next battle?" "If they don't invade in large numbers, we can take care of it. But we need to find a more permanent solution. As long as the black hole is open, they'll keep sending their people to our world." The black hole in the sky showed no signs of dissipating anytime soon. The Asuras were maintaining its stability on the other side. Stephen decided to enter the Asura realm again. He had to find the exorcists and get rid of them. With them out of the picture, the silver netting would be preserved, and the Asuras wouldn't be able to cross the rift in their real bodies. "I don't think the other representatives will be coming back with reinforcements," Scotty's representative said. "That might be for the best. It won't be easy for us to stop the invasion. When our forces are weakened, they could use the chance to attack us." Stephen agreed with his analysis. "You're right. They've always been our enemies. Their ambition to take over our territory won't disappear because of a crisis." To keep the hostile forces at bay, he pinned his hopes on the research and development team at the northeastern border. They were in the process of replicating the Asuras' weapons and researching the high-energy ores and crystals. All the hotels in the city worked overtime after the battle to help the martial artists recover. They provided delicious meals and alcohol without restraint. All of the expenses were billed to the United States' military department. Stephen and Liam went to Tristan's luxury suite. The crisis outside was in full swing, but here he was, sleeping soundly and snoring. "Wake up, Mr. Tristan. Someone's about to steal all your treasures." Tristan's eyes flew open, and he jumped out of bed. He reached into his pocket and heaved a sigh of relief when he found his tower, safe and secure. He glared at Stephen. "Don't joke about things like that. I'm an old man. Shock is bad for my heart." "I wasn't exactly lying. When the Asuras invade, our civilization will end, and your treasures will become their spoils of war." Tristan stretched and went over to the window. The black hole was the same, but the gore-stained battlefield was new. He knew how strong the Asuras were. He couldn't handle them on his own. "What do you want me to do? Open a spatial rift and lead your army into the Asura realm? How is that different from sending your people to their graves?" "Stop putting words in my mouth," Stephen snapped. "I want you to open a rift for us. I'll be going to the Asura realm to search for an exorcist. The mirror, threadworms, and the token will help us navigate their territory." Tristan took out his blade and placed it on the nightstand. "You know how this blade works. Open a rift yourself. Take the group from Tempest Citadel with you. They want to maintain the human realm seal, so they're your best allies." Liam frowned. Why couldn't this old man see the big picture? Was his life really that important in the grand scheme of things? Once the Asuras invaded, no one would survive the catastrophe, not even him. "You and Mr. Adams make a strong team. Our chance of success will be higher if you come with us." "If you two want to go, then be my guest. I'll be staying here." Tristan wasn't budging, so Stephen could only take his blade and leave the hotel with Liam. They boarded a private jet to the northeastern border. Replicating the Asuras' weapons was an urgent endeavor, and Stephen hoped to see some progress before he left. The weapon and equipment factory had been working continuously for 24 hours. The commander of the northeastern military base gave Stephen and Liam a tour. "If you're lacking in manpower, you can send us to the battlefield at any time. We're ready for battle." "It's not time for that yet," Stephen said. "Show me the latest research developments." The researchers had disassembled the cannon and analyzed its parts. They concluded that it wasn't possible to replicate it with their current forging and smelting standards. In other words, only the cannons that Tristan took from the warehouse could be used in battle. As for the ores and crystals, they were ground into powder and mixed together to produce a new type of bomb. The commander explained the simulated data on the computer screen. "The radius of the explosion reaches up to 60 miles. Stephen thought back to the time Tristan bombarded the Red Horn tribe's castle. It had a similar effect. There was no improvement. The commander continued to explain. "The radius is the same, but the energy released has increased by 500 times. We've prepared samples stored in the factory." The researchers were faster and more efficient than Stephen had expected. He asked the commander to arrange for the combat exercise at noon tomorrow in the Eastern Sea region. There would also be a live broadcast for the drill to demonstrate the United States' weaponry and hopefully suppress the hostile countries around the world. News of the newly developed weapons spread to every corner of the world in 10 short minutes. At noon the next day, helicopters hovered above the designated coordinates over the Eastern Sea. Warships were stationed a safe distance to observe the bomb. Stephen and Liam were in the helicopter at the center. They slowly ascended to thousands of feet above the water. "Are you sure you want to take this risk, Mr. Adams?" Liam asked. "This bomb is more explosive than the ones we have." "It'll be fine. The helicopter's fast enough to leave the area in time." Stephen adjusted the front passenger seat. He wanted the media to capture the Sovereign conducting the combat exercise. As the helicopter ascended, he looked out the window at Cadis's bustling port. The U.S. and Scotty's joint investment had taken off in no time at all. Cadis's economy was flourishing. The pilot announced that they'd reached a height of 40,000 feet. Stephen instructed him to open the hatch and drop the bomb. 10 of them fell into the ocean one after another. A deafening explosion rocked the sea. The waves surged, and rain clouds were condensed from the evaporating water vapor. Thunder rumbled, and lightning flashed above the chaotic waters. The pilot steered the helicopter away from the area. Stephen and Liam were pressed against their seats from the speed. "The heat radius from the center of the explosion is 12 miles, and the shockwave span 24 miles due to the resistance of the ocean," the pilot reported. "These numbers are lower compared to the simulation on land." Stephen was satisfied. The bombs were powerful at sea, but they would be even better on land. The combat exercise was transmitted to the military command center of each country. The footage alone proved that the United States' new bomb surpassed conventional nuclear weapons, and they'd probably already started mass production. The military department in Annapolis became lively. Countries from around the world sent congratulatory messages complimenting their technological advancements. It was obvious they were trying to get on the United States' good side. The hostile countries wouldn't be taking action against the U.S. anytime soon. With that issue out of the way, Stephen could focus on searching for the exorcists. After the representatives from Warhawk and Maplewood fled the northwestern border, they didn't head home right away. They stayed at a hotel to discuss their next plan. The U.S. and Scotty's combat forces were stationed at the cultural city. This was their best opportunity to attack Cadiz. They went as far as to send merchant ships and warships to Cadiz's international waters to pressure the royal family into joining forces. Their plan went up in smoke when the abrupt combat exercise was broadcasted. Maplewood's representative resisted the urge to turn off the TV in frustration. How did the U.S. design a bomb like that? Did they purchase a nuclear weapon from another country and modify it? The results are out, Hilskin said. There's no radioactive pollutants in the water. Aside from having his subordinate analyze the seawater for contaminants, he'd also contacted the Weapon Development Institutes in Warhawk. The researchers stated that with their current level of technology, they wouldn't be able to create something similar. We haven't fallen out with the sovereign completely. It's in our best interest to stand on his side. You want to send reinforcements? Maplewood's representative asked. We don't have a choice. We have to express our stance clearly and be high profile about it. Our countries are doomed if the sovereign attacks us after the crisis is resolved. Maplewood's representative was hesitant to send his soldiers to the northwestern border. His country's army wasn't that strong to begin with. He didn't want to sacrifice his people for no reason. While he was deliberating, an announcement aired on TV. Numerous countries from around the world were publicizing their support for the U.S. and Scotty. They were even planning to send teams to assist them. Their martial artists weren't that skilled, but their sincerity was on full display. They're one step ahead of us, Hilskin said. If we don't hurry, we'll fall behind. Scotty and the U.S. will take full responsibility for how the battle turns out. Maplewood's representative was pressed to make a decision. In the end, he gave in. The United States' northwestern border bustled with activity from the influx of martial artists from other countries. Rather than reinforcements, it was more accurate to call them a group of tourists with a free pass into the U.S. in charge of cheering on the sidelines. On the other side of the black hole, the chiefs of the 4 major Asura tribes were gathered for a meeting. After wasting a lot of time and energy, they still hadn't made any progress in conquering the human realm. Tartador was beginning to lose confidence. The chief of the Redhorn tribe, Spence, the chief of the Golden Horn tribe, Kagan, and the chief of the Silverhorn tribe, Drake, had led their troops to the Blackhorn tribe's territory to observe the black hole. Kagan and Drake impatiently bombarded Tartador with questions. To what extent do we have to suppress our energy to avoid triggering the silver netting? Have you dispatched any teams to the human realm? How long will the rift last? Do you know where to find the exorcists? The answer to half of their questions was, I don't know. Tartador thought he could deal with the human realm without an exorcist, but it turned out they were more troublesome than he'd given them credit for. Based on the cultivation technology used in the human realm, to pass through the black hole, your energy has to be suppressed to the level of a martial grandmaster. That won't give you much of an advantage against humans. Tartador's response tactfully conveyed that his tribe had suffered multiple defeats without explicitly stating it. The 3 chiefs were shocked to hear that. When did the martial artists in the human realm become so powerful? Spatial barriers periodically declined and strengthened. It was common for different dimensions to invade another realm when a rift was opened. To the Asuras, humans were like sheep waiting to be slaughtered. If you don't believe me, you can send your subordinates into the human realm, Tartador said. But don't say I didn't warn you. Our 4 tribes need to work together to find the exorcists. Spence remained silent. The tension between the Redhorn and the Blackhorn tribes was on the rise from the earlier conflict, and their relationship had dropped to a freezing point. It was already a miracle that the chiefs were sitting together at the same table and discussing the black hole. One intense discussion later, Kagan proposed a bold idea. We could release our strongest captives. They're experienced in killing. We'll suppress their cultivation to a martial grandmaster and send them to the human realm. They'll be tempted by the environment and abundance of food. While they're busy distracting the humans and weakening their forces, we'll search for the exorcists. Tartador thought his plan was brilliant. With the captives, they wouldn't need to sacrifice anyone from their tribes to deal a blow to the humans. The 4 chiefs instructed their subordinates to escort their strongest captives to the village where the black hole had appeared. The small and insignificant village became the most eye-catching landmark in the entire Asura realm. The most important step in their plan was to engrave a seal on the captives to reduce their cultivation to that of a Grand Master. Kagan and Drake were in charge of giving the captives a rundown of their task. You should be aware of how weak the human realm is. When you cross the rift, their world is yours for the taking. You can conquer cities and become their king. This raised the captives' morale and anticipation. They felt fortunate to have been chosen. One bold captive asked, "How strong are the humans?" "There used to be quite a few ascenders among them." "That's not important," Kagan said. "We trust your abilities. We Asuras have a special form of bloodline inheritance. To humans, we're invincible." "If you're afraid, feel free to return to the mines," Drake added. "We'll have someone else take your place." None of the captives chose that option. They were motivated to enter the human realm. If they carried out their task to the best of their ability, maybe the 4 chiefs would accept them into their tribe. Meanwhile, Stephen was making preparations for his journey to the Asaurus realm. "Jace, I'll be leaving things here to you again. Do the best you can to eliminate the Asuras while preserving our forces. If the situation escalates, stall for time and wait for me to come back." This was a heavy burden, and Jace wasn't sure he could live up to Stephen's expectations. The northwestern border was the first and only line of defense against the Asura realm. If the cultural city fell, the Asuras would be free to roam the world. Jace didn't know if he had what it took, but he would do his best. "I'll defend the city to the death." Stephen patted his shoulder. "You don't have to go that far. I won't be gone for too long. I'll be back soon. Tristan gave me his blade. I can open a rift wherever I need to." After Jace left the office, Stephen closed the door and the windows and summoned the ice dragon. When he was searching the vault at Phantasma Isle, the ice dragon had swallowed many of the treasures and hid them in its body. It was like a walking safe, similar to Tristan's tower. The ice dragon opened its mouth, and treasures protected by a barrier of blue light appeared on its tongue one by one like a conveyor belt. Stephen selected a uniform. He didn't know exactly what it did, but he assumed it would increase his defense. Next, he picked up a fancy gemstone necklace. Each stone possessed a different attribute. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were the 5 elements of nature. They simultaneously reinforced and restrained each other. He slipped into a pair of black boots, and the pull of Earth's gravity disappeared. He was weightless and light as a feather. Stephen selected all kinds of strange-looking weapons. Ever since he met Tristan, his eye for treasure had rubbed off on him. "It's best you familiarize yourself with the weapons before you leave," the ice dragon advised. "If you're not comfortable with them, they'll be useless in a fight." Stephen did a quick scan of the weapons. After a simple analysis, he'd grasped around 80 to 90% of their function. The phone in his office started ringing. He glanced at the number and saw that Kim was calling. A lot had happened since the black hole appeared, and Stephen felt like it had been ages since he had last went home. He'd committed a great sin. He picked up the receiver with a shaky hand. "Hi, Kim. How have you been? I've been busy at the northwestern border lately. I'm practically trapped here." Kim understood that Stephen had a lot on his plate. Under normal circumstances, she wouldn't have bothered him in the middle of the day. But after the combat exercise in the Eastern Sea, her company had been receiving a lot of strange orders. She wanted to consult Stephen before making a decision. "Ever since the military dropped a new type of bomb in the Eastern Sea, multiple weapons manufacturing companies have approached me with business deals. I think they have an ulterior motive." Stephen was of the same mind. "They're trying to get close to you and steal information on our new weapon. The other countries' intelligence agencies are monitoring each other. If one of them obtains the weapon, it'll spread to the rest of the countries. None of the factories in the US are producing the weapon, so they think it's privately manufactured. Our company doesn't specialize in the arms industry, though, Kim said. It's because I'm the sovereign. It's natural for outsiders to make this assumption. Kim's company was world-renowned. If she rejected the business proposals without a good reason, it would offend a lot of people and raise suspicions. Stephen decided to use these orders to benefit Cadis's economy. The U.S. had constructed arms factories in Cadis. They could use them as a cover to build a cooperative relationship with the weapons manufacturing companies. Are you okay with making a trip to Cadis? Stephen asked. The production and processing of low-end weapons can be carried out there. If your clients are fine with that, you can go ahead and sign the contract. Sure, but what about their ulterior motives? Don't worry. Just make sure there's nothing about handing over information on the new weapon in the contract. Kim made arrangements and set off for Cadis in a low-profile manner. At the same time, she instructed her assistant to adjust the description of their company on the official website. To ensure that her business went smoothly, Stephen contacted the 3 bosses of Silver Shield Corporation and the 9 States Financial Group. Regardless of where they were and how strong their bodyguards were, they didn't dare reject this call. Zorvis, Juno, and Mike were terrified of Liam's apocalyptic technique that almost destroyed the island. They left the U.S. in a hurry right after the martial arts competition ended. They hid in a coastal city in Warhawk and laid low. Warhawk's economy was thriving, and the 9 States Financial Group's business wasn't affected in the slightest. It's been a while, Mr. Adams, Zorvis said respectably. Is there something you need help with? I haven't seen you around since the competition. Were you not satisfied with the U.S.? Is that why you're not doing business here? Please, don't think too much of it. Our company is mainly run by the middle management. It's not necessary for us 3 to step in. I see. Would you be able to do a little investigating in Cadis? There are many arms trading companies about to develop their business there. Can you use your connections to find their background? This was a simple task that could be accomplished through a few phone calls. They accepted his request. We're about to venture into enemy territory, the Ice Dragon pointed out when Stephen hung up. Why do you still care about making money? It's not about making money. If all else fails, we'll still have to resort to drastic measures. Ordinary weapons won't be effective. I know. The Asuras are interested in our world because of its environment. As the last resort, we'll threaten to destroy the human realm with nuclear weapons and turn it into the same wasteland as the Asura realm. Stephen's last resort was to perish together with the Asuras. There wasn't much of a difference between the end of the world and being assimilated into another species without their rationality. The Ice Dragon wasn't from the human realm. It didn't care if the Earth was destroyed or not. Stephen finalized his preparations and called Liam and Ezra into his office. He opened a spatial rift, and the 3 of them stepped in. They arrived on the outskirts of the village where the black hole had appeared. The Asuras were everywhere. Did they already find the exorcist? Stephen asked. Don't tell me they're rounding up all their people and preparing for a large-scale invasion. I don't think so, Liam said. They're not that easy to find. They hid in the shadows to observe the situation. Stephen noticed unusual glowing patterns engraved on the Asura's skin. He asked the mirror what they were. It's a seal to suppress their cultivation and help them cross the rift into the human realm. If there are that many of them, doesn't that mean they're about to launch another attack? I believe so. They hadn't even begun to search for the exorcists, and they were already being faced with a tremendous amount of pressure. Stephen hoped Jace would be able to hold out before they returned. One of the threadworms dug a tunnel underground for them to hide in. The Asura realm was much larger than the human realm, and the population of Asuras was too dense. Finding an exorcist was a seemingly impossible task. Stephen took out the token and inspected the holographic map. He changed the angle and zoomed in and out, but he couldn't find any leads. You know what they say, Liam said. If you want to capture a thief, you'll have to capture the king first. The 4 chiefs are in that village. Why don't we target them? With them dead, the Asuras won't have a leader and they won't care about invading anymore. Stephen gave him an incredulous look. He had no idea how the Leviathan unit's leader trained his student. Liam was one of the most fearless and reckless people he'd ever met. Tartador had almost wiped out the martial artists from other countries in his phantom form. His real cultivation was most likely equivalent to the true immortal realm. Liam, I know you're talented, but don't rely too much on your totems. If you go head-to-head with one of the chiefs, they'll kill you in one move. That got Liam thinking. He was curious as to how strong an attack would have to be to shatter his totems and kill him instantly. One look at Liam's expression, and Stephen knew he was missing the point. At least he wasn't interested in facing off against the chiefs anymore. The threadworm in the mirror didn't say anything. They were a bundle of nerves because the chiefs were nearby. They were hiding underground, but if the chiefs found them, they were as good as dead. Stephen decided to stay in the tunnel and wait for the tribes to make a move. The chiefs were in as much of a rush as they were to find an exorcist. The Asuras would likely send out a team soon. If they followed them, they might find a lead. In the evening, the full moon shone brilliantly in the sky, but the night seemed especially bleak in the tunnel. Just as Stephen, Liam, and Ezra were dozing off, they heard the sounds of an instrument coming from the village. Stephen crawled out of the tunnel and saw a bonfire burning brightly on top of a platform built from stones. Are they holding a ceremony in the middle of the night? It's a divination, the mirror explained. It's similar to a fortune teller in the human realm. They're probably trying to find the exact location of the exorcist. The spiritual energy inside the mirror was familiar with these divinations. Before an important battle, it was common for the priests in the tribe to divine the future and predict the outcome. The four chiefs, Tartador, Spence, Coggan, and Drake, cut their finger with a dagger and let their blood drip into the silver bowl. The blood spun rapidly, forming a vortex. The moonlight was drawn into the bowl in a pillar of light. The surrounding area fell into absolute darkness. The four chiefs began to chant. With the power of our blood, we summon the grace of the Asura King. Please guide us to the exorcists. The spatial rift is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for a better life. The residents of the Asura realm worshipped the Asura King. He was the god who'd created their realm. Their divinations had never been 100% accurate, but they believed that this was because their prayers were too insignificant for the Asura King to lend them his assistance. As the pillar of light shone brighter, Stephen felt the mirror and the threadworm trembling. Their fear came from the bottom of their heart. Don't be afraid, this is just the beginning. The real battle will come later. Be careful, the mirror warned. The tribes believe that the Asura King is an omnipotent being. His existence represents law and order. No one can go against him. The blood-red vortex absorbed the moonlight, and it spilled out into a bowl, forming a shallow, reflective lake of silver liquid. It resembled high-definition screens. Mountains, rivers, and animals were displayed on the surface. An unfamiliar figure was at the center. The chiefs began to talk over each other. The Asura King has heard our prayers. He's showing us the location of the exorcist. Look carefully and memorize the details in the image. These are clues. We've already spread the announcement, asking for the exorcist to come forward in exchange for a high reward. They still haven't shown themselves, which means they want to stay hidden. We'll have to look for them ourselves. What are we going to do if they refuse? If the exorcist didn't agree to help, they wouldn't be able to destroy the silver netting. Conquering the human realm would become nothing more than an empty dream. Let's find the exorcist first, Kagan said. They're residents of the Asura realm like us. I don't believe they don't have desires or ambitions. If they have conditions, we'll do what we can to fulfill them. After scrutinizing the image reflected in the liquid moonlight, they concluded that the exorcists were staying at the Myriad Mountains. The four tribes formed a joint expedition team to head to the mountains. The black hole had appeared in the Blackhorn tribe's territory, so one of the elders led the expedition. Stephen's team followed them from a safe distance. The threadworms became their mount. They glided over the rocky terrain without making a sound. The Asura realm's terrain was complicated. At the center of the four major tribes was a blood-red lake surrounded by the Myriad Mountains. The mountains were well known for ferocious beasts and countless death traps. The further they went from the village, the more the beasts they came across. The cries of beasts were deafening in the darkness. The Blackhorn tribe's elder slashed in the direction of the sound with his sword, and an explosion lit up the night. The smell of blood filled the air. The beasts had turned into mincemeat before they could get close. The Asoras are too skilled, Stephen said. How can we slip past them and get to the exorcist first? Ezra's voice sounded behind him. I can handle them. I'm not as strong, but I can take them down with me. Stephen looked back. Ezra was already dismounting. He looked ready to jump into the fray. Stephen quickly pulled him back into his seat. Don't even think about it. I'm bringing you back to the human realm in one piece. All of us will be going home together. Both Liam and Ezra were fearless and had no sense of danger. In a way, Ezra was one of the most expensive weapons to exist. Dr. Dalton had spent billions of dollars and a hefty amount of resources to create him. Stephen patted the threadworm's scales. They could move freely underground and were ideal for sneak attacks. Get as close to the Asoras as you can without them noticing us. The threadworms began to tremble. They were big, but they were timid as mice. If they were a little more aggressive, the Asoras wouldn't have been able to catch them. An elder from the Blackhorn tribe is in the lead. His senses are sharp. He might notice even if we dig a hole in the depths of the earth. Do the best you can. If push comes to shove, we'll fight. A huge pressure fell on the threadworms. If Stephen let them in the wild because they were no longer useful, they would eventually be caught by the Asoras again. They braced themselves and did as they were instructed. The Asoras reached the foot of the Myriad Mountains right before dawn. Unlike the territories of the 4 tribes, the mountains were full of dense vegetation. It was a rare sight in the barren wasteland. Stephen was reminded of the participants who'd used seeds from another world during the martial arts competition. There were bones scattered below a massive flower. It was probably a man-eating plant. The safest way to head up the mountain was to follow the Asoras. They would open a safe passageway to the depths. After doing nothing all night, Liam was getting restless. I'll hide among the beasts to test the Asora's strength. Think of it as my personal training. Stephen agreed and told him to be careful. The chiefs were back at the village, and if he was in disguise, he wouldn't expose their identities. This was a good chance to see what the Asoras were capable of. The elder leaped into the air to observe the endless mountain range. The terrain was similar as far as the eye could see. He couldn't figure out which part of the mountains the divination had reflected. The falcons circling the forest noticed the elder and dove for him with claws outstretched. He slashed with his sword, and they blocked with their claws. The falcons shrieked. Their shrill cries affected the Asora's mind. They felt dizzy and disoriented. Sound waves affected the spiritual world, and it was a highly skilled technique that not just anyone was capable of. Stephen tossed the illusory pearls into the air. The gems didn't glow. They restrained their power and blended in with the sky. When the falcons flew within range of the gems, they became frenzied. They dove for the elder, attacking more aggressively than before. He was forced to return to the ground. He embedded his sword in the dirt and transmitted his energy into the earth. The rocks in the vicinity shot into the sky, penetrating the falcons. Blood and feathers rained over the foot of the mountain. Just when the elder thought it was over, the feathers fluttering to the ground suddenly changed direction. They were imbued with the gem's energy. The Asoras at the front of the crowd had no time to dodge. The feathers turned their heads into a hornet's nest, and their lifeless bodies collapsed with a thud. The Asora's skin was impenetrable, but their eyes, nose, ears, and mouth were weaker than the rest of their body. The elders cursed. Stay vigilant. We haven't even entered the mountain yet, but you're losing to a couple of beasts? Do you want to be wiped out before we find the exorcist? The Asoras brandished their weapons and sliced the feathers to pieces. They couldn't understand how the falcons had taken out their companions. Liam returned to Stephen's side. During the tussle, he'd secretly aligned his attacks with the falcons and the gems. Good work, Stephen said. The Asoras haven't noticed us. It's possible that the beast's aura overpowers ours, and it's hard for them to differentiate. When the gems were high in the sky, he'd connected his vision and scanned the mountains. There was no sign of the exorcists. They'd likely built a small house in an inconspicuous area on one of the mountains to keep themselves isolated from the outside world. The remaining falcons fled in a panic, and serenity returned to the mountain. The elder and the Asoras continued their journey towards the depths. Their expedition team consisted of almost 100 Asoras. They had to find some way to lower their numbers before they found the exorcists. Stephen instructed the threadworms to take Liam with them and get close to the Asoras. Even if they were discovered, the Asoras wouldn't think too much of it. It was normal for beasts to be aggressive. The threadworms obeyed and drilled a hole through the earth. Liam followed closely behind. The Asoras slowed down when they entered the forest. They had to tread carefully because of the difficult terrain and hostile vegetation. A large man-eating flower reached for the Asoras with its vines. If they were dragged into its core, they would be dissolved by its corrosive juices and turned into fertilizer. Stephen summoned the ice dragon. It appeared in the form of a miniature dragon. When Liam makes his move, pretend to be a beast and attack with him. That's not all I can do, the ice dragon said. I can get the beasts around us to help us. Stephen was confused. The ice dragon was a completely different species from the beasts on the mountain. How could it command them? The ice dragon explained proudly. I am, after all, one of the divine beasts at the top of the food chain. My aura scares regular beasts into submission. It's similar to spiritual suppression. The lower one's cultivation is, the more submissive and intimidated they are of those of higher cultivation. Stephen pricked his ears, listening to the forest around him. After the ice dragon appeared, the beasts had become much quieter. Beasts had sharper senses than humans. The ice dragon was a predator, and they sensed the danger from its presence. The elder cut the man-eating flower to pieces with his sword. As the Asoras trekked up the path, fruits that looked like pomegranates fell from the trees. They burst when the Asoras approached. The seeds inside the fruits were sharper than the blades. They cut deep into the Asora's skin. Stephen was glad he decided to follow the Asoras instead of going ahead. It would have been hard for the three of them to make it up the mountain unscathed. A few miles later, Liam made his move. The ground below the Asoras opened into a bottomless pit. The unlucky Asoras fell into the darkness, sealing their fate. The threadworms had dug out traps that restrained their movements. Liam's sword pierced their hearts. The elder inserted his sword into the earth. Stop hiding and come out. The threadworms drilled out the cracks of the dirt. Their scales were sturdier than metal plates. They swept the Asoras off their feet, knocking many of them back. Before the Asoras could retaliate, a pack of wild wolves emerged from the depths of the forest and pounced on them. The ice dragon was commanding them from a secure location. The Asoras regained their balance and chased after the wolves that were scampering across the clearing. Their team had broken formation, and Liam saw his opportunity. He hid in the shadow of the forest. The blade in his hand was more lethal than a poisonous snake. The instant the Asoras sensed Liam's aura, his blade pierced their eyes, and his inner energy turned their brains into meat paste. He was lightning fast, and every strike was fatal. His subtle attacks escaped the elder's notice. The elder was locked in a fierce battle with the threadworms. You disgusting beast, dare to betray our tribe? The threadworms suppressed their fear and retorted. Your tribe has no right to enslave another species. They charged at the elder, using their scales to their advantage. Even his treasured sword would have a hard time piercing their defenses. Stephen condensed the Killen's aura and lit the cracks on the ground ablaze. The flames enveloped the mountain, turning the battlefield into a sea of fire. The elder couldn't understand why the fire seemed to be targeting him. He couldn't sense anyone else in the forest except the beasts. The Myriad Mountains were known to be the home of thousands of beasts, but it was strange for this many to attack at once. The elder looked up at the sky, deliberating if he should continue onwards in the air. He changed his mind when he saw the shadow of a massive bird in the clouds. He wasn't keen on experiencing a repeat of the scuffle with the falcons, and even if he did traverse the mountain through the air, it would consume too much stamina to maintain his position above ground. The threadworms swept the clearing, forcing the elder to leap back to dodge. Are you daydreaming during a fight? It seems you don't value your life. The era of the Asoras will soon come to an end. When the humans cross the rift, the ruler of the land will change. The elder laughed. How could beasts like you who can't see the light of day predict the future? Humans are weaker than the beasts on this mountain. We're going to become their ruler, not the other way around. The threadworms had successfully provoked the elder. The Asoras thought themselves as a superior species. They looked down on the human realm and saw them as insects. The elder launched a more aggressive attack on the threadworms. His sword bounced off their scales in a series of sparks. Stephen remotely controlled the killen's flames. They spread along the cracks towards the elder's feet. Once the fire touched him, he would go up in flames. Just then, an Asura ran up to the elder in a panic. Something's not right. The number of casualties is increasing at an alarming rate. You couldn't deal with a couple of wolves by yourselves. They're the only beasts around aside from the threadworms. I don't know, but we're getting killed off one by one. We need to get out of here. Liam had killed the Asuras when they were near the cracks that the threadworms had created. Their bodies fell into the depths of the earth, erasing the evidence. On the surface, the battlefield looked clean. There was no sign of casualties, but it was true that the number of Asuras had decreased significantly. The elder gathered his energy into his sword and slashed forward, forcibly opening up a tunnel that was miles long. The surrounding trees, plants, and rocks were cut into fragments by the residual energy. Stephen stopped Liam and the threadworms from chasing the Asuras. We've accomplished our goal. Their numbers are much lower than before. We can't be too hasty or else they'll notice us. Liam sheathed his blade with reluctance written all over his face. I think we can wipe out the entire expedition team on our own. If we kill them off, who will lead us to the exorcist? Stephen chided. The mountain is too big for us to search. We need the Asura's help. A distant mountain peak covered in snow was on the other side of the Myriad Mountains. 3 cultivators were standing outside an igloo. They were the exorcists that the Asura realm had painstakingly been searching for by day and night. Exorcists were rare, and they were almost extinct. The 3 of them were brothers, and their names were Luan, Drew, and Rio. The 4 tribes are trespassing on the mountains and killing the beasts. Do they not care about their own lives? Drew asked. Maybe they ran out of food in their territories, Rio guessed. If they hunt here, they'll lose their lives in minutes. There were many forbidden areas scattered throughout the Asura realm, and the Myriad Mountains were one of them. They were prohibited for a reason. The strongest beasts on the mountain were as strong as the 4 chiefs. That's not it, Luan clarified. The 4 tribes issued an announcement recently. They're looking for exorcists. A spatial rift has appeared again. That's not important, Drew said. We made this place our home because it's quiet. It's perfect for cultivation. We can't leave our home behind because of them. Their business is none of our concern. Exorcists specialized in sealing their opponents' inner energy, but the 4 tribes had an overwhelming advantage in numbers. It was hard to say what would happen if the Asuras found them. Let's wait and see how this plays out, Luan suggested. We're valuable to the 4 tribes. Maybe we can reason with them. Hours later, the Asuras finally reached the depths of the mountains. The vegetation loomed overhead, preventing the sun from shining through. The elder ordered his team to spread out and search. Stephen hid in the foliage out of sight with Liam and Ezra. He increased the height of the gems to scout the area. The threadworms slithered through a crack in the dirt to warn them. There are rivers underground, and the water level is rising rapidly. It's about to burst through the surface. Does that mean this area is about to flood? Stephen asked. Maybe, but the change in water level is unusual. There might be a beast hiding in the rivers. The threadworms believed that it was the flood dragon. It was a beast that spent its days cultivating. Despite its name, it wasn't a true dragon until it reached a certain point in its cultivation. Before then, it liked to hide in the depths of lakes, rivers, and oceans. There was nothing Stephen could do before the flood dragon showed itself. Maybe it would submit to the ice dragon since it wasn't a true dragon yet. Half an hour into the Asuras' search, the ground trembled, and water surged through the cracks, forming swamps over the terrain. If they lost their footing and fell in, that would be the end of them. The elder stopped in his tracks and released his inner energy into the ground. The Myriad Mountains were famous for its unusual phenomena, and he wasn't surprised by a strange movement of the water underground. He ordered his team to head to higher ground. The flood could trigger a landslide. The ground rumbled and shook violently. Columns of water sprayed into the sky, and a massive black dragon flew through the cracks. The elder's face lit up at the sight of the flood dragon. If he killed it and absorbed its energy, his cultivation would improve by leaps and bounds.